It's pretty crazy. It's amazing. I was in the G League a couple of days ago. I had to fly here, come in here, and they told me I'm about to start. So I'm pretty excited. I'm just focused about bringing energy and trying to win the game.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me as always on Twitter at redrock_bball. We are going to cover the 4 games from Wednesday, a really small Wednesday in the NBA. We're going to preview the 9 games we have for Thursday in the NBA, a big Thursday. And then we're going to shine that player spotlight on Nerlens Noel of the Dallas Mavericks. So Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. The monstrous line of the night. It goes to Giannis Antetokounmpo of the Milwaukee Bucks. Yanni was fantastic in this game. He had 38 points with 10 rebounds, 7 assists. He hit a triple. He had 3 steals. He was at 55% from the field. He hit all 5 of his free throws. But it wasn't enough to get the Bucks over the line against the struggling Orlando Magic. A really poor loss for Milwaukee, who looked like at this point, looked like they were going to be almost destined for the 8th seed, but of course the Heat lost to the Kings today as the Eastern Conference playoff teams fall over themselves to try and continually lose. Yanni started off the season on fire this year. He was the number 1 player for a big stretch. He's obviously ceded that to Jimmy Harden with Tone Davis breathing down his neck, and Yanni's fallen down to the 7th best player this season. He was 6th last year, so it is actually a decrease in his rank despite scoring over 4 points extra per game. And that's in large part due to the decrease in his defensive numbers. His steals have dropped by 0.2 per game, and while that might not seem like a lot, it is a big drop in standard score, and his blocks have gone down a lot from 1.9 to 1.4, and that's where so much of his value came from last season. And because it's dropped off this year, yes, even though the scoring has gone up and his usage has gone up, meaning his overall impact and percentages has increased, that decrease in defense has caused his overall fantasy value to dip this season. He is going to be a top 10 fantasy guy for many years to come, but until he can start hitting threes at an elevated rate, and over the last 2 months he's up to 0.7, which is not huge, but he's only at 0.5 for the year. Unless he can start hitting 1 to 1.2 triples per game and get the defensive numbers back up, then he's really not going to be challenging for that top 2 or top 3 fantasy sort of status. But he will be in that 7 to 12 range, probably more comfortably in the top 10, although the last 3 months have seen him slide outside the first round as the 13th ranked player over the last 40 games, which again is not ideal, especially at this time of the year. But a big game from Antetokounmpo in today's action. The waiver wire line of the night goes to a player from that same game, DJ Augustin of the Orlando Magic. He had a huge performance, dropped in 32 points with 6 triples, had 3 rebounds, 4 assists and 2 steals, and shot the ball exceedingly well. He went 9 of 15 from the field, and he hit all 8 of his free throws. That was a fantastic performance, obviously, from Augustin. And don't look now, but over the last 2 months, he is the 86th ranked player, and over the last month, the 63rd ranked player. You pretty much can't afford to have DJ Augustin sitting on your waiver wire. Now, the last 14 games worth, he's shot 50% from the field and 52% from 3. There is no way of that continuing. We're well aware of that. But he's giving you 5 assists per game. He's giving you over 2 threes per game. He's still probably going to give you 12 to 13 points per game. He is clearly the starting point guard, and he's clearly going to get 28 to 30 minutes per night. There's no real minute split happening with Shelvin Mack, especially with Evan Fournier and those two play together. We're seeing a lot of DJ Augustin, so you can't really be leaving him on the waiver wire. If you've got a guy like Ish Smith, it's a no-brainer to switch and get someone like DJ Augustin. And again, he is a guy who is a poor shooter. His last 4 seasons have been 42, 40, 42, and 38% from the field. He's currently running at 45 this year and 50 over those last 14 games. But we do expect that true shooting of 71 in those last 14 games to dip pretty significantly, but it's the assists, the minutes are there. And if he can just keep this going for another 10, 12 games, then you're going to have this great potential top 70 type player down the stretch. So make sure that DJ Augustin is owned in your league. It might not work in your team because of who you've got and how strong you are, or you don't need those stats or you don't need that position, but at least go and have a look, because the numbers he is putting up, it merits a look in any sort of fantasy format. The young gun of the night goes to Budrick Hield of the Sacramento Kings. Buddy had 24, 6, and 3. He had 2 steals with a block. He hit 2 triples, and he was 9 of 16 from the field and 4 of 4 from the free throw line. Really good to see the minutes back up after playing an inexplicable 15 minutes in that last contest. He has shot over 50% in 2 of the last 3 games. In fact, if you look at his shooting percentages, they are just really off. Against Orlando, he was 0 of 8. Against the Nuggets, he shot 53% on 15 attempts. Against the Thunder, he was 1 of 6, and then today, 56% on 9 of 16 shooting. Bud is ranked outside the top 120 this season. One of the things that was really keeping his fantasy numbers inflated earlier in the year was a really high steal rate. That has started to dip, and he's back down under 1 steal per game. Still up considerably from last season, where he was at 0.5. But what has also happened is his elite shooting from his Sacramento days last year has not carried over. He's only at 43% from the field, when at the end of last year he was shooting, I believe, now this is off the top of my head, I think he was shooting maybe 45 or 46% field goal percentage, which made him look like he'd be a great option. He offers nothing in the assist category. He doesn't get you rebounds. He's not this high usage guy. I don't think Buddy Hield is a very good NBA player. I don't think he'll ever become a very good starter. Yes, it is only his second year, but he is already 24 years of age. Look, he could take a big step forward next season, but what we're seeing from him now is really in line with what I thought he would be as he came out as a rookie. And when your preconceived notions then match up with what you see, it's hard to see too much changing. He'd need to start becoming an aggressive rebounder and be more of a playmaker, which can happen, because the last month we're seeing him up his assists to 2 per game. It's still not a large jump though, and it's only a marginal jump in per 36 value. He'd need to start bringing those steals on a more regular basis and start bringing the blocks, which again have increased over the last couple of months, but still not quite there. Is he a 10-team league guy? Probably not. Is he a 12-team league guy? Well, I guess that depends on what your squad looks like. If he was on your waiver wire, I wouldn't say, oh my God, what's going on? But if he was on your team, I also wouldn't say that same thing. So he's a borderline 12-team league guy, probably leaning more towards, yes, you want to own him. But I guess the limited nature of what he can provide, I would 100% prefer DJ Augustin to Buddy Hield at the moment. He is just a points, and not even a high points guy, but a 3-point streamer guy who does shoot well from the line, but just never gets there. So it's really a limited impact he has in that category. The dud of the night. It was a weird night, only 4 games on. This guy just barely meets the criteria, 71% ownership. Marcin Gortat, 2.7 rebounds, 2 assists and 2 blocks. I'm not going to go on about this guy. He's bad. We all know he's bad. We all know he shouldn't be owned, but it looks like there's just a ton of inactive leagues. He is outside the top 200 over the last 3 months. He won't be an ownable guy next season. He might not even be a starter. He's already 34 years of age. There is no need to be considering Marcin Gortat in 14, 16, maybe even 18-team leagues. I would give you 18-team leagues probably. I might even give you 16-teamers, but he has been putrid for nearly the entirety of this season, save for a couple of games here and there, including that first game of the year where he went 16 and 17 and blocked 3 shots. We're going to break down all the action from Thursday, including a couple of overtime games, some injury-riddled teams, meaning the rotations were sort of all over the place. So let's get into those now and try and work out what we can from the action that went down on Wednesday. The first game, the Bucks and the Magic, just a really disappointing loss from the Bucks. Let's go to, we talked about Yanni already. Eric Bledsoe had 20 with 8 assists and 4 steals. Strong from him, while Middleton had 22, 3 and 5 with 4 triples. Also strong. Let's check in on Brandon Jennings, the player that I had a fairly lengthy discussion about the other day, and then someone responded to my YouTube video by saying that he has the street hunger that I will never understand because I was too busy eating kangaroo legs off a Barbie. Just nice coded xenophobia there as well. The street hunger didn't go so well for Brandon Jennings in this game, who had 2 points in 9 minutes, not the near triple-double. He had 1 rebound, 1 assist. He shot 1 of 3 from the field, and while what he did in the first game was nowhere near what you're going to expect from him, I don't think this is quite what we should expect from him. But as I laid out the case, I thought fairly convincingly, well, I convinced myself, sure, he's not a 12-team league guy. He needs 25 to 28 minutes to get into that realm. He's not going to get it. Now, the last game, part of the excuse for the minutes was Eric Bledsoe got into foul trouble, so I've got to use that here. He did get into foul trouble and had 2 fouls in about 3 minutes, and that's the only minutes he played in the first half. But even then, he played 5 second half minutes. We saw Jason Terry get the nod over him, and he just isn't that good. And he needs big minutes, probably even 30 minutes, to be honest, to really be a fantasy contributor. And there is just no way in hell he is getting those minutes. It's just not happening. As I said, I don't know if I said it on here, if I said it on Twitter, probably the biggest fantasy impact Brandon Jennings is going to make is the player that gets dropped to add him and someone else grabs that player. And that's happened in some leagues. I've seen some crazy drops that have been made in order to acquire Brando, and it's not going to work out that well. Tone Snell, 18 minutes, 2 points. When Daly and Broggo come back, I don't even know where Snell fits in this rotation. He's just not very good. While Jason Terry had 5 points in 24 minutes, and Jabari played 22, had 14 and 4, but it just never feels like he's going to get back to 30 minutes. And if you're in the playoffs and you need to cut someone, Jabari could be that player. The Muppet had 8 and 9 as well with a steal and a block. Solid numbers without being spectacular. On to the Magic. Nikola Vucevic had 22, 9 and 9 with 4 steals. That is an absolute monster from Vuce. Bucks centers early in the season were a real playground, I guess, for opposition centers. It's eased off a little bit there, but that's big from Vuce. Well, Johnny Simmons was fantastic. Now, he was a turd against the Spurs, but had 35 points with 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and 7 triples. But he is not an electrifying three-point shooter, and he shot 58% here. He took 22 attempts, 31 usage, and hit 11 of them from the field overall. In fact, he was 7 from 12 from 3. So I expect those numbers to come down, and when they do, the other numbers, they just don't really cut it for Simo. But with the injuries to Gordon, to Evan Fournier, he still should be owned, as much as this is really a high-level outlier. Mario Hezonja just has not been able to do jack shit with Gordon out this second time. 9 and 5 for Mario. He is not a 12-team league guy anymore. While Johnny Simmons struggled a little bit, 4 and 4, but still added that block, still hit the triple, and he is a real defensive specialist who I believe will remain starting until at least Evan Fournier returns. Ken Birch got a lot of those power forward minutes. He had 6 and 9 with the block. That's really a deeper league sort of situation rather than anything that happens in standard leagues. I'd love to see them play Birch as the backup center over Bismack Biyombo down the stretch, just to see what he can do. But it's only going to be a deep league consideration, I believe. The Washington Wizards and the Boston Celtics, and double overtime game. This one, the Wizards were down 20 early. They fought back to get the victory here. Brad Beal played 47 minutes and had 34, 7 and 9 with 2 steals and a block. While Thomas Satoransky, he played 35 minutes, but that's noticeably fewer than the other starters, Markieff Morris and Otto Porter, because he was in foul trouble. He had 5 fouls pretty early on in the fourth quarter. Still a strong performance, 10, 2 and 6 with 2 steals, and needs to remain owned. Markieff is a must-own guy, 27 and 4, while Otto Porter had 18 and 11. Kelly Oubre, the minutes have been well down for Oubre. He is struggling a little bit, 8 and 3 with 2 triples and 2 steals, more of a 14 to 16 team league player. While Jan Mahinmi comfortably outplayed Gortat here, 14 and 11 with a steal and a block. It's getting to the stage where in a 16 team league, I might even prefer Mahinmi, but it was only a couple of days ago where he was a DNP CD. I'm not sure if Scotty Brooks is going to have the balls to replace Gortat as the starting center with Mahinmi. It would be interesting, and I think it might work out actually pretty well. I just don't think that's going to be the case. Well, Ramon Sessions replaced Tim Frazier as the backup point guard again, and it's really only deep league value, but those 4 assists that Sessions provided, that can make the difference in a 20-team format. On to the Celtics. There was no Kyrie, there was no Al Horford, there was no Marcus Smart, there was no Jaylen Brown. So we had just weird shit going on all over the place. Terry Rozier started at point guard. We had Jason Tatum at shooting guard. At small forward, it was Marcus Morris. And the dancing bear, Gershon Yabesele, he got the start at power forward with Bainesy at center. Kyrie doesn't look like he's going to be out too much longer. Horford should be back for Friday's action, and Jalen should be back early next week. Marcus Smart, we still don't know, apparently getting a second opinion on this thumb. So there is some short-term value here, but it's going to be just slowly eroded for a lot of these players over the coming 4 to 5 days. Rozier, 21, 5 and 9, 48 minutes, 2 steals, 3 blocks, 4 triples. As I say with this guy all the time, give him the minutes and the stats will absolutely fly. Now, his shooting was absolutely shitful. 47% true shooting, 38 from the field, and only 1 of 3 from the line. A reminder, he's improved significantly this year, but his true shooting was worse than Marcus Smart's last season. That's how bad he was. Bainesy played 33. He had 7 and 5 with a block, while Greggy Munro,
As Greg runs in, we realise this could get dangerous.
he played 25 and had 16 and 10 with a steal and 2 blocks. We know that if Munro gets 25 minutes a night, he can be a 12-team league player, but Al Horford was out of this game, so that boosted his and Baines' minutes. We do know that Vanilla Tice is gone for the season. It doesn't mean that we're going to be getting 25 a night of Greggy Munro. Now, yesterday I shit all over Marcus Morris as a player, and he came out and put up a huge performance. 44 minutes, 31 and 9 with 4 triples and 2 steals. But I did mention that in the DFS portion that he was in a great situation here, and he was going to put up numbers, and you had to have a look at him. But a usage of 28%, hit 50% of his shots. As I detailed yesterday, he is not this good of a shooter. He is not this good of a rebounder, and he doesn't get steals. So while everyone was out in this game, he got the increased usage and he converted. That's not something he does all the time. He is more of a 14-team league guy. I could understand owning him in 12s while Kyrie, Horford, Smart, and Brown sit. Fine, because he could just bludgeon his way to minutes and numbers. But when everyone is healthy, he's just not going to be able to do that. Shane Larkin was on a minutes restriction. He played 24 and had 11 with 4 assists and 2 steals. Could be a sneaky mid-sized league player while Kyrie remains sidelined. While Yabesele had 4, 3, and 5. Solid performance in his first start. Well-rounded fantasy production. But will he ever get an opportunity, or will he ever be good enough to become a starter for Dynasty Leagues? I'm not sure that he will. I know that he's super fun. He's got a great nickname. And based on that, people will overvalue him. So it's worth having a look to see if you do own him, if you can get a decent haul back in terms of a trade. I just don't see him as this awesome long-term option. Jason Tatum had 19, 5, and 6, but the percentages were brutal. 39 true shooting, just a piss-poor game in terms of efficiency, but the counting stats are pretty nice there for Tatum. Onto the Miami Heat and the Sacramento Kings, another overtime game, a bad loss for the Heat. There was no Dwayne Wade, there was no Hassan Whiteside, there was no Joshie Richardson, so a lot of the value here, again, is not something that's going to be replicable in every game. Jimmy Johnson, this is why we drafted him. Yes, Jim Johnson, 34 minutes, 18, 10, and 7, 2 steals and a block. Big numbers from him. But when everyone's healthy, when Wade, Whiteside, and Richardson come back, you're talking about, 70, 80 minutes are going to come back into that rotation. He's going to lose some of that playing time, and the production just hasn't been there from him this season. If those guys remain out one more game, then Johnson is a guy that you can stream in, but I wouldn't be looking at this and go, yep, turn the corner. The Iron Shoulder was fantastic, 33 points on 21 shots, while Tyler Johnson had 14 and 5 with 4 triples, and again, with the injuries, he's worth looking at, as is the Duke, who took 17 three-point attempts. He hit 6 of them for 22 points, but he is really just a 3-point streaming option, while Olynyk had 13, 8, and 5, and Adebayo had 6 and 16, and both of those guys' minutes will dip once Whiteside is back and will render them not very useful for 12-team leagues. Justice Winslow, the shooting was off, and that's something he'd been really improved on this year. Still hit his threes at a really high rate, which has been a massive improvement for him, but he was... On his threes, he was 2 of 3, and overall he was 2 of 9 from 2-point range. So obviously well down there, 10, 7, and 4 with the steal, but he can contribute in other areas, and I believe he is a 12-team league player. On to the Kings, no Skal Labissiere, but Willie Cauley-Stein re-entered the starting lineup. He had 10 and 9 with 3 steals and 2 blocks, and if someone dropped him, you should be going to add him. While Zach Randolph had 22 and 9 in 33 minutes. The big minutes for Randolph really continue to shit me, but that's a good performance. I can't deny that. I wouldn't be adding him in 12-teamers. Bogdan Bogdanovic was fine, 14, 3, and 3, nothing spectacular, while De'Aaron Fox had 20 points, but the free throw shooting was bad, just 2 of 5. You got to love the 64% from the field, though, but very little else there for Foxy, but clearly a must-own guy, and unsurprisingly, Garrett Temple's big game in the Kings' last outing was a mirage, and he had 5 points in 22 minutes. Let's look at the last game of the night, the Los Angeles Lakers and the Golden State Warriors. Big minutes for so many players in this game just because of the injury. There was no Kyle Kuzma in this one, no Brandon Ingram. So Isaiah Thomas got a start. He had 20 points with 7 assists and 5 triples. Brook Lopez played 36 and had 20 and 6 with 2 triples and 5 blocks. A big Lopez game. And I can't believe the minutes have gone up as much as they have. I would have thought he was playing close to this at the start of the season, but they continually limited him. But he's putting up good numbers now, needs to be owned. While Lonzo, another bad shooting night for ball, but still had 5 rebounds, had 11 assists, had 3 steals, had 1 block. The lack of scoring and the poor percentages are always going to be a handicap for him. They might increase a little bit, but in the right punt build, he is going to be Draymond Green type of fantasy value. That's the sort of comparison you should have with him. Julius Randle fouled out, but he had 22 and 10 before doing that, while KCP had 13 and 4. This game, we saw Derek Williams play 8 minutes. We saw Ivica Zubac play alongside Brook Lopez. That's how weird this game was, while Alex Caruso played 21 minutes and had 3 steals. Very little to gain from looking too far into those guys, though. The Warriors, they were without Steph Curry. They were without Draymond Green, Pat McCaw, Dave West. And then Klay Thompson has been ruled out for about the next 2 weeks as well. So the starting lineup consisted of Kevin Durant. That's cool. But then we had Quinn Cook, Nick Young, Kevon Looney, and Zaza Pachulia was back in ahead of JaVale McGee. Durant was great, 26, 5, and 6. That's strong. Well, Uncle P had 18 and 3 with 3 triples and a steal. With Klay Thompson sidelined, Young and Steph for the next few games at least, Young is going to start. He's going to get shot attempts. He's not going to be afraid of taking them. So if you need points and threes on a very similar zone with like a Wayne Ellington or even a Bud Hield, Young could be a guy that helps you there. As for Looney, he started with Green out at 11 and 5 with 2 steals and a block. Nice numbers, but with Jordan Bell returning, Looney and Green not likely out for any more games than this one. Looney's not going to be a guy that you look at outside of very deep stuff. Second consecutive big game from Zaza, 10 and 12 with 5 assists. Back in the starting lineup, while Jordy Bell, he just did what he does. 6, 3, and 2, a steal and a block, good percentages, 18 minutes. I don't think he's going to become a 12-team league guy this year, but that was a strong performance. While Andre Iguodala played 22, had 3, 2, and 3. I don't see them really extending him too much, even with the Thompson and Curry injuries. So I don't think that he is a must-own 12-team league guy. He's more of a 14 to 16-teamer. While Omri Caspi had 15 and 7, and Quinn Cook nailed 13 points, including a triple, and he can be a deep league help, at least while Steph is out. Shawnee Livingston was also pretty good, but his minutes are going to be pretty closely monitored. 13 and 4 in his 20. Again, more of a deeper league sort of situation for Shawnee Livingston. That wraps up all of Wednesday's action. We're going to fly straight into the player spotlight now, and we're heading to Dallas to look at a player who has been, I guess, a real conundrum this season, and that is Nerlens Noel of the Dallas Mavericks. Noel's a player who I've always liked from a fantasy point of view, but his attitude caused problems in Philadelphia, and it definitely caused some problems in Dallas to start this season, so much so that we just saw him out of the rotation. He started a handful of games to begin the year, but never really got big minutes. It looked great. First game, he played 20 minutes and had 16 and 11 with a steal and 3 blocks. I went, yep, let's go. It's all happening here for Nerlens. That's great. But then after that, it didn't happen. He was so disinterested that he just was out of the rotation, playing single digits in minutes, and then he had this thumb surgery, which is apparently elective. But since he's come back, he has been strong. He has gotten at least 1 steal in each of the 6 games since he returned, and he's blocked shots in 3 of those 6 games. His shooting percentages has been higher as well. The free throws, he's only taken free throws in 1 game and went 2 of 5 in that one. But his rebounding's been good. 14, 9, and 6 rebounds in his last 3 games. Putting up some pretty okay numbers. For this season, it's hard to see him being a must-own standard league sort of a player, but in the very similar realm to John Isaac, if you need steals and blocks, Noel's probably on average going to give you 1 of each of those per game, along with some decent rebounding and okay field goal percentage. But it's all about what happens with him in the future is what we're looking at here, because he is a player that has had huge fantasy seasons before, top 50 fantasy seasons. In fact, that 15-16 season in Philadelphia, he was the 47th ranked player, averaging 11 and 8 with almost 2 steals and 1.5 blocks on 52% shooting, with real scope to get better. He had a stretch post All-Star the year before where he was at 2 steals and 2 blocks, which is really rarefied territory. But this season has really soured me on him and his overall value. when we look at Noel and how this plays out, he's not yet 24 years of age, and he's going to be an unrestricted free agent in the offseason. It seems unlikely that he will go back to Dallas, but what sort of team will take Noel and give him 24 to 25 minutes per night? That's hard to see. Now, lots of things can change, but if he gets 25 minutes a night, he is a must-own fantasy guy. But has the attitude changed enough? Has his reputation with the team changed enough where people will go, we want him, and we want to make him a key part of our rotation? All his advanced numbers were generally pretty positive, apart from this season where the team is 12 points better off with him sitting his ass on the bench. It's the worst season of his career by PER. It's the first time he's had a negative box score plus minus in his career as well. Defensively, he's still putting up really strong numbers, but offensively, he's fallen off a lot, and that's caused big dips in those advanced metrics. But I still believe that he can recover from this, and I still believe that he can have maybe one, maybe two top 70 seasons left in him. It's all going to be dependent on where he ends up next season. Can he check his attitude? Can he fix his attitude? Because if he gets 25 a night, as I've said multiple times here, he's going to be a top 100 guy. He's going to get you 1.2 steals, 1.4 blocks, or flip those around. 7 or 8 rebounds. Maybe he gets you to 10 points. Maybe he gets you 55% shooting. The free throws are always a worry with him, but those other numbers can be really, really useful, and he can be an impactful sort of player. Just the off-court stuff is a real problem, and we see that with so many players around the league, how much that does impact the playing time that they get and their overall production. I just don't know if that has changed enough for us to see that happening with Noel. For this year, look, more of a streamer, a deeper league guy, but I am very, very interested to see where he ends up next year. Free agency is going to determine so much. He's not like a no-brainer. I believe he's going to be top 100 guy. It depends on where he goes. He's got probably a 40% chance, I think, of being a top 70 guy next year, which is still pretty high. But it's not like he is a lock, like the minutes are going to come or anything like that. The talent is still there. The defensive ability and the ability to rack up defensive stats is still there. It's can he do some stuff offensively? Can he not be an absolute dick and ingratiate himself into the coach's good books? Can he do all those things? That's where the real doubt comes in, I guess, with Noel. It's been a frustrating season for him. It's been a frustrating season for people who may have wasted an early pick on him, but I do think, again, there is some light at the end of the tunnel for you people in dynasty leagues if we're looking at how he's going to pan out in the coming seasons. All right, let's move on now and talk about the DFS action that we just saw go down on Wednesday with the perfect DFS lineups. On FanDuel, it was Terry Rozier at 53.5 and DJ Augustin at 44.6. Brattles Beal had 60.9 while Budrick had 44.7. Yanni had 67.5 and Johnny Simmons had 41.3, while the power forwards Marcus Morris had 47.3 and Jimmy Johnson had 47.5, with Greggy Munro getting 34.5 at center. That totaled 441.8, a massive total for a 4-game slate. The overtime games helped. The total cost on that was $59,400. On DraftKings, Beal had 61.75, while Rozier had 51.75. Yanni, 68. Jim Johnson, 47.5. Jan Mahinmi, 33.75. DJ Augustin, 47.25. Marcus Morris, 48.75. And Budrick had 43 for a total of 401.75. And that cost $49,900 dues. All right, we're going to look at these games coming up for Thursday. We'll start off with a really big game in the Eastern Conference. The Toronto Raptors taking on the Indiana Pacers. In Indiana, the Raptors are favored by 3.5, and the total is 300. No, the total is 213.5 points. Norman Powell is doubtful, as is the Jedi OG Anunoby.
Hello there.
So we're probably going to get some minutes maybe for Nigel Hayes, but I think Malcolm Miller is going to be the starter there, while Trevor Booker is questionable with a sprained ankle. Domantas Sabonis is out, and Booker was looking to get a bit of a boost there. So guys like Al Jefferson, but Thad Young and Miles Turner should also see a pretty significant increase in their minutes. You might also see TJ Leaf chiming in, but he's not going to have a huge amount of value. At point guard, Freddie VanVleet's at 4,600. He has been playing very, very well. I don't like the matchup necessarily here for Fred. I also don't think the upside's all that high, so I think he's a fade, as is Daz Collison. I'm just not sure what the role's going to be. Will he start? Will he play 30? Will he play 22? And even at 30 minutes, is the upside actually high enough? And in most cases, when I think about that, I'll say no. Kyle Lowry's at 7,300. I really like that price for Lowry. It's down quite considerably. He has really played well against the Pacers before, averaging 42, so I like that. While DeLon Wright at 38. Some extra minutes at small forward could be available for DeLon, so he is a GPP sort of guy at best. Corey Joseph's at 5,200. He's been really exceeding that value pretty consistently. The negative matchup against Kyle Lowry is an issue. He struggled the last time out against these guys, his former team, obviously. But in a tournament, it's not a bad option. DeRozan at 7,800, I really, really like that. I think that getting 40 out of DeRozan shouldn't be considered too much of a stretch, even though his last few games have been a bit of a struggle. I don't expect this to be a blowout either, so hopefully he gets his full allotment of minutes, while Vic Oladipo is down to 8,800. That's really, really good pricing to get down that low. Now, his numbers haven't been awesome lately. The shooting's been way off. So if I used him, it would only be in a tournament. That price opens things up. Bojan Bogdanovic at 4,900 just could not shoot anything against the Sixers, 1 of 11, and that gave him 11 points. That is why we're always cautious with Bogdanovic. The matchup is a bit of a negative here for him as well, but I think you still can consider him at least a tournament guy, if not cash. Lance Stevenson, I don't want anything to do with that. Power forward. Thaddeus Young's at 54. Yeah, he'd been shit before, but the injuries to Trevor Booker and Sabonis, that should pump his minutes up, so I think he is fine at 5,400, while Serge Ibaka at 5,200 just can't really get anything going. I don't hate using him here, but I wouldn't be considering him a tournament guy. Siakam, Booker, Malcolm Miller. Miller maybe if he starts, but probably not. At center, Miles Turner, 6,800. Again, some extra minutes should be coming his way. He's averaging 38 over the last 3. I'm happy to use him here against this Raptors team, while Jonas Valanciunas is at 7,500 now. Absolutely caned in the last game with 46 points against the Nets. The Pacers and Miles Turner can be sometimes an easier matchup for centers. It hasn't really been reflected over the last couple of weeks, but at 7,500, I just don't have the trust in Valanciunas' playing time to get him involved. While minimum salary for Al Jefferson, he has had a 30-point game this year. The likelihood of it happening again, I think it's pretty minimal, so I don't think we'd need to get too invested in him. On DraftKings, Oladipo at 8.2. That price is getting real sexy there. So I think he is a strong tournament play. You could even use him in cash, while Miles and DeMar, Miles Turner, not CJ Miles, both of those guys are really strong DraftKings cash plays. Lowry at 7,700 is obviously at an elevated price. You could still use him, but I'd rather spend down to the extra $100 to DeRozan and use him if I'm going to use one of those backcourt studs in this game. Valanciunas' price is also more appealing here at 6,600, while Thad at 53 he should be in the mix as well. Let's go on to the next game. We're talking about the Philadelphia 76ers and the New York Knicks. The Sixers are favored by 9, and the total is 217 points. Lance Thomas and Tim Hardaway are both questionable for the Knicks. If Hardaway is out, surely we'd see Frank Ntilikina back into the starting lineup, moving Courtney Lee to the 3, but who knows what's going to happen with the bullshit that the Knicks pull on very often. At point guard, Manny Moutier is at 4,600. He's bad. He's had a few strong games. You can use him in a tournament, but you want nothing to do with him in cash. While Timothy John McConnell's at 36. Noted Nick killer, Timothy John McConnell, who is averaging over his last 5 games 17 points. The last 3 games against the Knicks, 36. He had a triple-double last time against this team. For whatever reason it is, he kills them. Point guards kill the Knicks in general. That's a great salary for McConnell, so you have to love using that in GPP. Now, there's nothing where I go, and I don't look at it and go, I believe that McConnell just has the wood over the Knicks and no other team. There's some element of chance and variance in there. So, yeah, locking him in cash is not like, I've got to do it because he's going to get 35 against the Knicks. But at that price, why not? Could he have a big game? Of course he could. The matchup does really suit him. Ntilikina's at 37, just rarely doing anything with those minutes at the moment, and the matchup is a bit of a negative one, while Trey Burke's at 42. You can, if you're going to use them, they're tournament-only sort of players. At shooting guard, Bellinelli, no. Redick, a tournament player, while Hardaway at 6,000. If he plays, I think you could consider him in cash, but even then, I have a level of concern if a guy's playing with an injury on a tanking team like this. Courtney Lee also at minimum salary. You could throw him into a tournament if we see Hardaway ruled out and maybe they have to play him some extra minutes. Mick Beasley's at 51, had 26 in the last game. If Lance Thomas is out, I think that makes a really, really strong option for Bees. They just don't have many options there, while Bob Cove at 6,000, putting up some okay numbers, but that salary takes a little bit of the value off him, and I'm not super interested in him. I'm not interested in him in cash at all. Troy Williams at 3,600. Just watch for him, because if Lance Thomas is out, this guy is averaging already 20 points per game over the last 3. He does have maybe a 25 or 26 point game in him. If Thomas is out at 3,600, I think he could be a real interesting option. At power forward, Dario Saric at 6,500, absolutely fine. Love the matchup here. While Ben Simmons at 8,800, also a very, very strong matchup. While Ersan Ilyasova's at 39. He has also done well in the past against the Knicks. I'm just not sure the minutes are going to be high enough to really get behind him. At center, the process, Joel Embiid, 9,900. Had 50 in the last game. He's clearly on deck for another opportunity at 50, so you have to consider using Embiid. He's going up against Ennis, who's at 5,800. Ennis Cantor. The minutes have been well reduced for him, but he has crushed the Sixers recently, averaging 46 the last 3 times. But I would only feel comfortable using him in a tournament just with the way the minutes are trending. With his minutes trending down, Cox are feeling more secure. Kylo Quinn at 5,500, and he's averaging 32 over the last 5. There's absolutely zero issue with using Kylo Quinn because he does produce even in limited minutes. If for some reason he got 30, which I don't think is going to happen, then he's going to be a real interesting option. Another player to have a look at is Isaiah Hicks. If Lance Thomas is out, maybe you want to take a flyer on him, but in most cases, I'd say you probably wouldn't. On DraftKings, the process is at 9,700, Simmons at 87, and Saric at 63. I think they've all got cash value here, while Cantor at 67 is a pretty strong fade. I just hate that price tag for him, and Beasley at 54 is really only in play, I believe, if Lance Thomas is out. Love me some Cock here at 4,700. That is a really good price for O'Quinn, who's averaging 29 over the last 5 over on DraftKings. Let's crack on now. Let's get into the next game. We're talking about the Charlotte Hornets and the Atlanta Hawks. The Hornets are favored by 4.5 points, and the total is 220. Cody Zeller is doubtful, while Jezza Lamb is questionable with his back spasms. At point guard, DeAndre Bembry and Malcolm Delaney are both out. Isaiah Taylor is at $4,000. He should get those extra minutes. He had 22 in 21 minutes in that last game. I think he's absolutely fine to use for cash, enabling you to get some other high-priced players in. Really strong floor, I believe. While Tyler Dorsey, a guy who started and only had 8 points in 19 minutes, is a high upside GPP guy that people will be going away from because of how he burnt them last time. But he has got 30-point upside in him, which is pretty good value at that salary. I like Kemba a lot at 8,300, should really torch them. While Dennis Schroeder at 66, I would love Schroeder otherwise. I just don't know if he's going to play 34 or 26. If this game gets close, they're just going to put him on the bench. And I don't think it will, but that's what they'll do. At shooting guard, Nick Batum, 7,800, just killed it in the last game. He's averaging over 42 points in his last 3 games. The matchup is a solid one, especially without Kent Bazemore out there, but that price I think is too expensive to use Batum. While Damian Lee had 23 points in his first NBA game, he is still a minimum salary guy, so sure, if you want to throw him into a tournament, knock yourself out. No issue with that at all. Malik Monk at minimum salary. If Jeremy Lamb is ruled out, I think Monk is going to be playing backup shooting guard, and he's going to be playing backup point guard, unless they want to give those minutes to Dwayne Bacon or if they want to bring Julian Stone in. But I think Monk would be an interesting tournament guy. We've seen him have a 30-point game already this season, and that, while that might seem far-fetched, it's a possibility if that position opens up. Trevion Graham's a minimum as well. He could get a boost if Lamb is out, but I'm not really super interested. Kid Gilchrist at 3,700. Look, he's got a good record against Atlanta, so if you want to use that, no worries. I don't think I will. Well, the artist formerly known as Torian Prince is crushing. He's averaging 34 over the last 5, so FanDuel's bumped him to 7,000, and that makes him a pretty tough a pretty tough guy to roster at that sort of a price tag, I believe. Still can use him because he's coming off 46 in the last game, which is clearly a lot of points. But will he be able to replicate that? I'm gonna guess probably not, and that makes him a little bit hard to roster at that sort of salary anyway. What else are we looking at here? Power forwards. Frank the Tank's at 4,300. The minutes have been okay for him. It's a great matchup for Kaminsky. And with Zeller unlikely to play, could get some center minutes. I think he's a strong tournament play. Well, the Baptist, John Collins at 59, is also in the tournament mix, and I'm not interested really in Marv Williams. At center, The Undertaker, Dwayne Dedmon's at 5,800. Centers have been putting up big numbers against Dwight Howard. For whatever reason, the numbers have been pretty good. At 5,800, I think that he is... I think that it's a little bit tough to really use that outside of tournaments, and even then I wouldn't be super interested. I am interested in Mike Muscala at 42, who feels like a pretty good cash bet for 23 to 24 points, while Howard at 8,500. Centers have done well against the Hawks. He's done well against the Hawks. Getting 42 out of Dwight here should not seem like it's overly challenging, so I think he's a pretty good cash center as well. On DraftKings, for tournaments, I think Kemba at 84 is good, Schroeder at 62, and The Undertaker at 47. I love that for Dedmon. That price is so much better than how it is on FanDuel. Whereas for cash, I like the Baptist, John Collins at 52. That's a good price. Isaiah Taylor at 37 and Mike Muscala at 38. Both of those are really strong, low-priced cash options that can give you some floor to enable you to play some higher-priced guys in your lineups. The next game we look at, the Chicago Bulls and the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies are favored by 2 in this game. The total is 212.5 points. Paul Zipser is questionable, while Tyreek Evans has been listed as questionable to return. Still no Andy Harrison, and Mario Chalmers is doubtful. So the return of Evans is interesting. I'm not sure he's going to come out and play 32 in this one. It could be just a 22, 23-minute performance, which we're unsure of at this point. The point guards we want to look at here, Chrissy Dunn's at 6,900. I think that's too high for Dunn. I think that they will continue to keep him a little bit below 30 minutes. He did have foul trouble in the last game, but I can't see him getting 33 or 34. I think that might be a little bit too high. While my boy Campaign is at 3,900. He's averaging 21 over the last 5. He had 27 in the last game. I think he's fine. Against Kobe Simmons, who allowed Brandon Jennings to almost put up a triple-double, Cameron Payne could very easily have 25 points here. So I think he's in the mix, as dumb as that sounds. At shooting guard, actually, who's another? Antonio Blakeney, another point guard who jacks a lot of shots. If Justin Holiday is out again, which we're not sure about, then Blakeney is an interesting potential GPP guy. At shooting guard, Tyreek's at 72. I wouldn't want to use that in his first game back if he plays. Well, Zachary Levine at 6,000. He's been abominable. Levine just really shitful. The defensive matchup here could really work in his favor, so that makes him a tournament guy, but I wouldn't want to trust him in cash. Kobe Simmons at 37. Man, he's got a good matchup, and if Tyreek is out, that's tournament worthy. While Benny McLemore at 4,900 has just been consistent, and that's not an adjective that you would use to describe McLemore all that often, but it has been over the last couple of weeks. If Evans is in, it's a little harder to use him, but if Tyreek is out, then I think Benny at 49 is not a bad play. At small forward, the Hammer, Denzel Valentine, minutes well down, production well down last game. Still got some tournament upside, especially because of the matchup, but I won't want to go there for cash. While David Nwaba at 4,500, I think he's hit and miss as well. Dylan Brooksy Brooks is at 5,000. He averages against the Bulls 39 points. Yes, it's only one game, but it's a big performance. So he has clearly got that tournament upside. At power forward, Noah Vonleh at 3,600 with Lauri Markkanen already ruled out. Vonleh had 21 points in 27 minutes last game at 3,600. 21. If 21's your floor and he shot horribly and he could have had a much bigger game, I really like Vonleh here. Jarrell Martin at 4,600, I also think is in a pretty decent spot, so I like using him, while Jermichael Green and Punch Bob Shipbloke are a little bit more highly priced. 5,900 for Green, I'd fade that, while Portis at 6,600. A good, strong performance from him last game, 37 points, but with his variability, I think we look at him more as a tournament sort of a player. At center, you've got Chris Felicio and Deontay Davis, who you should leave alone, while Marc Gasol at 7,800. The matchup is super sexy for Gasol. When he plays, the minutes are fine. I think that this is a great tournament option for Gasol. A lot of people will be well out on him, but I think that he's got 40-point upside here pretty clearly. while Robin Lopez, if he plays, he's only playing 12 minutes, so very little for you to get interested in there with him. Onto DraftKings. There's not a lot that I love here on DraftKings, to be honest. Vonleh at 38 is probably the pick of the bunch. You can consider Macklemore at 52, probably a bit high. Campaign at 38 is not bad. Gasol's probably too high. Portis is probably too high. Levine, again, in that same tournament situation at $6,000. So the pricing not as good as what it is on FanDuel for this Bulls-Grizzlies game, which is going to be a real exercise in shit basketball. The Clippers and the Rockets were up to next. Clint Capella is listed as probable with a thumb issue, while Ryan Anderson is out once more with that hip problem. At point guard, you've got Chrissy Paul, 8,300. He's been fine against his former team, but nothing super sensational. He was dealing with a knee issue apparently, but he is ready to go. I think that he's be a tournament guy and a tournament guy only, while Austin Rivers at 6,000. If you want to use Austin in cash, I think you should consider that an option. I don't think it's a terrible play at all. He's been really strong for a spoiled rich kid, putting up some pretty good numbers, averaging 29 over the last 5, which is not far off where you need to be at that $6,000 mark. Jim Harden, shooting guard, 11-3. Absolutely no worries with getting that into a lineup. Or Eric Gordon at 4,800. I don't think you want to use him in cash. Yeah, he can have some big games, but with Paul and Harden playing, it's not ideal. Lou Williams down to 7,300, has played very well against Houston. He's going to have lots of opportunities. He has struggled a little bit in the starting lineup, but I do love the fact that this salary has dropped as much as it has, and that really puts him back on the radar, even for cash. Sindarius Thornwell, another player I should have talked about before. He's a point guard listed player on FanDuel, 3,700. The numbers have gone up and down for him, but he is a guy that could play 30, could rack up some defensive numbers and be a strong rebounder. At 3,700, I wouldn't want to use him in cash. There are much better, cheaper options out there that I would use, but he's an interesting low percentage tournament player just because of that playing time. Small forward, Joe Johnson's at 35. He's done very little in Houston. I'm not super interested with other options around. PJ Tucker, Gerald Green, Wes Johnson, Trevor Ariza. It's just a bunch of shitfulness there at small forward. At power forward, Toby Harris, 7,800. Love what Toby's been doing. Might be a little bit too high of a price considering how well the Rockets have been defending the power forward position with Mamute and PJ Tucker switching, and Harris is going to get all that defensive attention on him. The table, Montrezl Harrell at 4,500 has done pretty well against his former team. That salary, I think, takes away a lot of the upside, though, so I'm not super interested in him there. At center, Capella, 7,400. There are better center options out there. Centers have done pretty well against DeAndre Jordan recently, but I'm not sure that salary is at a great spot for Capella. Well, Jordan is up to 8,800 for a reason, because he's been playing very, very well. I think that salary is probably too high. And if I'd use him, it'd only be in tournaments. But even then, I just think it's getting too high to really consider him a must roster player. On DraftKings, I like Harden. I like Jordan at 81. That's a much better situation for him. And I like Rivers at 59. They're all cash and tournament sort of players. Capella at 63 gets an extra level of appeal on DraftKings as opposed to him on FanDuel, while Lou Williams hasn't dropped enough on DraftKings for me to really get as excited, or not even excited, but for me to get as interested as I was on FanDuel. The Pelicans and the Spurs, no Kawhi Leonard in this game. The Spurs have had 2 blowouts in a row in opposite directions, so it's been hard slogging trying to get your head around what this rotation means. I don't know who's going to start. Will Rudy Gay start? Will Pau Gasol start? Will Danny Green start? We just don't know what they're going to do with that starting lineup. At point guard, DeJounte Murray's at 6,600. I think that's too expensive. Pat Mills at 4,000. Not interested. Rajon Rondo at 6,300. If you're going to use Rondo, it has to be a tournament. He had 56 in the last game, but the 2 prior games to that, he was under 24 minutes in both of those, in under 20 in one of them. So you're really hard to really rely on Rondo. Ian Clark at minimum salary doesn't get it done for me, nor does Tone Parker. At shooting guard, Dan Green's at 42. I think this game's almost an entirety of a fade, apart from Anthony Davis, who even then you might consider a fade. Drew Holiday's the other one who comes into play at 8,500, but Spurs' defense against shooting guards has been immaculate, with guys like Kyle Anderson switching Dan Green in there, providing some real problems. And Holiday's been great, but that is an exorbitant price. Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gay are a couple of small forwards, 52 for Anderson and 42 for Gay. The matchup is a very big positive for these guys. I would only really consider using Anderson in tournaments, and even then, I don't think his upside's really high enough to justify it. Etuan Moore and Darius Miller aren't strong plays either. LaMarcus Aldridge at $8,000. He's been good. Has he been $8,000 worth? I think I'm going to say no to that, and I don't think I'd be too keen. Well, Nick Mirotic. It was good to see Mirotic play 30-plus minutes off the bench last game. At 5,300, he is clearly a tournament option, but I wouldn't be doing it as a single entry, and I wouldn't be using him as a cash play. Well, Tone Davis at 12.5. That is a big price for Davis because he's really good, but that is still a big price. With a lot of these cheaper cash values that I've been talking about, that enables you to put a Tone Davis into cash. But in general, I'd lean more towards tournaments. But we know he can go big. He can go huge, but that is a big investment on a 9-game slate. At center, you've got Pau Gasol at 5,600. I think Pau is a really good tournament play here. I wouldn't want to use him in cash because he could play 15 minutes or he could play 30. But I think he's a great tournament upside guy here. Well, Emeka Okafor had 32 in 26 minutes last game. Really, really impressive from him. I just don't necessarily buy into it 100%, or at least that level of production. On DraftKings, DeJounte Murray at 5,900. That's a tournament-type player. I like the price drop there. His rebounding and block numbers can help you. While Tone Davis at 11.5 is in a really, really good spot on DraftKings, so I'm totally on board there. Drew Holiday also more appealing, but still not really an upper echelon play. And most of the other comments that I made, or all of the other comments, pretty much apply straight onto DraftKings. Let's go on to the next game now. We're going to be looking at the Phoenix Suns and the Utah Jazz. The Jazz are favored by 12.5, the largest spread of the day. The total is 213. Devin Booker is listed as probable. Will the Suns go small again and start Dragan Bender at the 5 and TJ Warren at the 4? Will Tyson Chandler be back in the rotation? I would have to assume that going up against a Gobert favors front court, you don't want to match up against that with a Warren Bender front court. So I can see Tyson Chandler back in the rotation. Big source Alan Williams has been ruled out of this one as well. So Alex Len will get his 7 minutes. Ravishing Rick Rubio, 7,400. Obviously a point guard. As good a matchup as you can find for the Ravishing one. He was down in that last game, but this is another 40-point opportunity for Rubio. So I am fine with using him. While Lord Alfred Payton's at 6,400. Not only is this a shit matchup, his production and his minutes have been dropping considerably. So he is a strong fade for me. Dante Exum, shout out to Dante, going to be making his season debut. Really excited to see what he's going to do over these last few games. I don't have high hopes coming back from another really long injury, but it's good to see him back in there. That could and should take Alec Burks out of the rotation. The Donovan Mitchell, 8,200, hasn't really been living up to that price tag in any of these games recently, but at 8,200 against the Suns, I think you have to use him, mainly because it's the Suns. Any other team, I would say no, too high. Devin Booker at 7,500. At least the best thing about this game is we're going to get to see Suns fans and Jazz fans fight on Twitter. It's fantastic as they all snarkily quote tweet each other. Absolutely awesome. Booker better, Mitchell better. Just dumb shit like that. So I can't wait to see these two players have games and see the snarky petty bullshit rear its head on Twitter. Always interested in that. Devin Booker, and I'm very sarcastic when I say that, 7,500 for Devin Booker. Yeah, he's absolutely fine to use. In fact, I'd probably prefer him over Mitchell in a lot of cases. Shaq Harrison at 36. He's one of those guys that with FanDuel's steal scoring system, he can really beat that value on a day by getting 3 or 4 steals in 20 minutes. So it makes him an interesting tournament guy without being a priority tournament guy. Jingle and Joe's at 6,600. This guy is just putting up numbers on a consistent basis. His lowest score in his last 5 is 30. That's a good cash floor. It's a great matchup. He's got 40 upside. No worries with using Jingle and Joe. While Tony Warren Jr. is at 6,500. The minutes are okay for him. He's a fairly solid floor guy as well. Both him and Ingles you could consider in that same zone. While Joshy Jackson at 56. If Jackson starts, I'm all about him at 56. If they run him off the bench, I think I'd leave him alone just because he could play 35 or he could play 25 minutes. And in 25 minutes, he probably doesn't get to that value. At power forward, Dragan Bender's at 4,000 and Marquise Chris is at 3,800. They are twin fades here, while Jay Crowder at 54. Crowder's been pretty solid without being spectacular in Utah, and I think that that's not a bad cash guy to use, while Derek Favors at 55. I'd take Crowder over Favors. He's outperforming him, and he comes in $100 cheaper. Jonas Jerebko, big game in the last one. Don't rely upon that. At center, Tyson Chandler, no. Rudy Gobert, 9,500. That is a shit ton of dollars, but it's also a brilliant, brilliant matchup for Gobert, so I'd be happy to use him, much like Don Mitchell, just because of the matchup. Over on DraftKings, I like Rubio and Crowder as tournament sort of guys, but you could easily convince me to put them in cash, whereas Booker, Ingles, the Don, and Rudy are all strong cash plays, despite some of the elevated salaries for them, but they're still in really strong positions, especially Mitchell at 7,400 with that great matchup his way, and the stuff for Josh Jackson, the same applies on DraftKings as it does for FanDuel. All right, let's go on to the next one. We've got the Detroit Pistons and the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets are favored by 7.5, and the total is 216 points. Dwight Bikes is questionable. Reggie Bullock is also questionable. If Bullock is out, we really like what Luki Kennard can do. If Bikes is out, Jameer Nelson will play, and he will do nothing. So there's very little for you to care about there. Point guards, Ish Smith's at 5,500. Just because of the positivity of the matchup for Ish, I would consider him in a tournament, but he's been shit. He had fewer minutes than Jameer Nelson last game, so that's why I'm not really all that interested in anything apart from a tournament. Whereas the Blue Arrow at 6,500, putting up some pretty strong games from Jamal Murray. That price is probably a little bit prohibitive, especially for cash. I think there are better ways to go. At shooting guard, Farton Will Barton's at 6,000. He has been bad. He has been really bad. But I like this opportunity for Barton. I think that the minutes will turn around. I think the production will come back, and I like him at 6,000. I also like Gaz Harris. Nice, Gary! 6,400 for Gaza. Should be able to get you 30. Yeah, strong floor, decent ceiling. Really like the play here. While Luki Kennard at 3,800, he's averaging 24 over his last 3, but it's going to require, I think, Bullock's absence for Kennard to really become a strong option here. At small forward, Stan Johnson's at 37, no interest, while Baby Neck Wilson Chandler is up to 5,500. Because he put up 48 in 41 minutes against the Lakers, that is an unrealistic expectation for Chandler, so not interested. At power forward, Mason Plumlee's at 42. Putting up some okay numbers, actually, Plum. I think he's got a limited upside. I'm not convinced about his floor, so that's why I'd probably steer clear of him. While Blake Griffin at 8,000, I'm okay with using Blake here. He was shit in the last game against the Jazz where they got their ass kicked, only 15 points, but I think another 40-point game is realistic here. While Paul Millsap is up to $7,000, despite putting up 20 points in 26 minutes last game. That is too high on FanDuel, considering they just won't give him these big minutes. Hard to consider that an option. At center, I love Drummond here, 9,500 for Drummo, while Nick Jokic is at 9,400. Both of these guys can be deployed. I think Drummond's more of a Takashi type of guy with tournament value too, while Jokic is more of a tournament player, but he seems to have been putting up some really good numbers alongside Paul Millsap lately. Let's go to DraftKings. Tournaments, Jokic, Millsap, and Ish Smith, really strong options there for tournaments. Where for cash, you got Drummond, Griffin, Gaz Harrison, Farton, Will Barton. Very similar options indeed to how it looks on FanDuel. Let's go on to the last game of the night now. It's the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's the Portland Trail Blazers. The Blazers are favored by 5, and the total is 222 points. Rocket Rodney Hood is questionable. He seems to think he'll be back for this game, so that's going to reduce the impact of the plumber J.R. Smith and Kyle Korver, while Larry Nance also thinks he will play. Suffered a hamstring injury last game, but he should be right to go in this one. At point guard, Shabazz Napier's at 3,700. Probably don't want to really get involved there. While Lillard at 9,700. Lillard is crushing every single game. One of the best high-priced point guards or high-priced players out there. Love him. Georgie Hill at 4,500. I think that's a pretty strong fade. CJ McCollum, 7,300. Really going under the radar at the moment. 32 is his lowest score in his last 5, which is a really strong floor. It's a good matchup for McCollum. I'm absolutely fine with rostering him. While Rocket Rodney Hood, Jordy Clarkson, J.R. Smith, Kyle Korver, I don't want any of them in cash at all. I would consider Korver in tournaments, but even then, with Hood likely returning, the minutes are going to be so squeezed amongst those players that it's just unlikely that they return value. At small forward, Evan Turner's at 4,200. Surprisingly, he plays well against Cleveland. He's coming off a good game of his own last time out for Portland, and at 4,200, I think he does have 30-point upside, which would make him a tournament guy. I want nothing to do with Mo Harkless, but of course, we've got LeBron James.
LeBron James.
He's at 12,500, another expensive one. Anthony Davis is costing the same. I would take Davis over James, but you could easily make an argument to put LeBron in, get yourself 60 plus, and fit some other guys in around him. Not interested in Mo Harkless. At power forward, Al-Farouq Aminu, the Chief.
Sometimes may be good, sometimes may be shit.
If I had to lean one way, I'd say shit. He's averaging 15 over the last 5. He can always get hot. The matchup is a positive, but man, you're only using him in a tournament. As for Larry Nance at 7,200, that's a fair chunk, and I think I would end up fading that one and not interested really in Eddie Davis. Jeff Green could be interesting here. In fact,
My name is Jeff.
sorry, I think he is interesting. At 4,200, he had 34 last game. He will likely remain starting even with Rocket back and has a chance to play 28 minutes. Probably won't, but has that chance. I think at 4,200, he's worth looking at. Zach Collins at 3,800 is a tournament option. Centers have done pretty well against Cleveland lately. Nurkic at 6,600, we can only use him in tournaments given how unreliable he is. And Ante Zizic at minimum salary, he's playing well. Could you use him and get 17 points out of him? Maybe. I think there are better ways to go about it, though. On DraftKings, I like LeBron at 11.4 a lot. I like Lillard at 9.6 a lot. And Evan Turner at 38 is a pretty strong tournament upside player. Larry Nance, way more in play on DraftKings at 6,400. And much of the other stuff remains or is the same as how it looks over on FanDuel. All right, let's have a look now at this at the other sites before we wrap this up. On Yahoo for tournaments, we're looking at The Undertaker, Dwayne Dedman, Mick Beasley, Jarrell Martin, Manny Moutier, Noah Vonleh, Evan Turner, Dan Green, Tyler Dorsey, Kyle Korver, and Cameron Payne. And for cash and tournaments, we've got The Moose, Isaiah Taylor, Freddie Van Vliet, Frank the Tank, Kyle O'Quinn, Jay Crowder, the Baptist John Collins, Dario Saric, Benny Simmons, Gobert, Drummond, Embiid, Jokic, and Jimmy Harden. On Moneyball, we've got Jokic, these are for tournaments, Jokic, Embiid, and Drummond, Ravishing Rick, Dennis Schroeder, the Baptist, Ish Smith, Jay Crowder, Frank the Tank, Noah Vonleh, Evan Turner, and Cameron Payne. And for cash, we've got Muscala, Isaiah Taylor, Jarrell Martin, Mick Beasley, the artist formerly known as Torian Prince, Jingle and Joe, Dario Saric, Miles Turner, DeMar DeRozan, The Don, Kemba Walker, Dame Lillard, and Jimmy Harden. And on Draft Stars, let's look at it for tournaments. Farton, Will Barton, Zachary Levine, Thad Young, Ed Davis, Noah Vonleh, Evan Turner, Tyler Dorsey, Sindarius Thornwell, Joe Johnson. And for cash options, Isaiah Taylor, Kyle O'Quinn, Jay Crowder, formerly Jingle and Joe, Ricky Rubio, Miles Turner, DeRozan, Blake Griffin, Don Mitchell, Kemba Walker, Andre Drummond, Damian Lillard, and Jimmy Harden. If you are listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, go ahead and leave a 5-star rating and a review. It's a great way of helping out this show. You can also find the show on Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, and on Spotify. And of course, YouTube. Give me a thumbs up, give me a subscription, and leave a comment below. Check out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we cover your team every day. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Gershon Yubesele.